I'm going to read to you from an excerpt from a short story called The Wash. And this is, it's a short story that actually takes place in Tucson, Arizona. And so for those of you unfamiliar with Tucson, the wash refers to a dried out riverbed, basically. It's like the natural drainage systems of the desert. And they're very dangerous places. There's the danger of flash floods at any moment. The narrator is an older narrator looking back on a time when she was 11 years old. And the other main character, Tamara, is the older sister of the narrator's best friend. This is important information. You'll see why. But basically, the older sister is kind of a rebel type, and the narrator worships her. Okay. I followed Tamara as she started down a narrow, gravelly path that headed into undergrowth. I peered after her with a growing feeling of trepidation. The washes I was familiar with were nothing but rivers of dry sand. But this one was a tangle of mesquite trees, ocotillo, jumping cholla, prickly pear. It was a haven for all of the animals my parents had warned me about. Diamondbacks, Gila monsters, brown recluse spiders. The kinds of animals that you'd never see until you were on top of them, and then you were as good as dead. But I was not going to let Tamara know that I was afraid. I followed her in silence, carefully placing my feet where I had seen her place hers. Jojoba branches scratched at my bare legs beneath the hem of my jean shorts. I wished I had on long pants like Tamara did. She moved forward with a careless grace, swatting away the branches that snagged at her clothes. She clearly knew the path intimately, though it could hardly even be called a path, as it was not more than 6 inches across on the ground. Down it went, crooked and scrabbly, the gravel occasionally breaking loose and falling towards the wash bottom with a scraping, dry sound. At a small clearing, Tamara stopped short. Without turning around, she held up her hands and motioned me to stop as well. I stood there behind her, picking at my fingernails and watching the trail of hair down her back, how it quivered as she breathed. I kept my own breath light and shallow, trying to be quiet, and stared so hard at her that her silhouette seemed to grow darker as the light poured around her body and pierced my eyes. She stood that way for a minute or more. Finally, I let my breath out in a sigh louder than I'd intended and shifted my weight to the other foot. Tamara turned back and threw a glance of annoyance at me before searching the bramble over my shoulders. I turned too, but could see nothing. My foot scuffed over tiny, hard pebbles, ripping through the dry silence. "Shit," Tamara said. "We'll never find this snake if you keep doing that." "Sorry," I said. A shadow passed across us, mid-afternoon thunderheads, and the air grew chill. The desert had been unusually dry that year. It was monsoon season and should have been raining every day, but there hadn't been a drop in almost 2 weeks. Tamara and I both looked up, wondering whether the rain might finally fall. But the air grew warm again and the clouds dissipated, leaving only thin strands of sun like threads of a web through the trees. When Tamara looked back at me, she laughed. "Never mind," she said. "Let's play a different game." Her eyes burned through mine. I didn't know what she was thinking, but suddenly I did not want to be there. I thought of Megan back up by the swing set and wondered whether she was angry with me for leaving her behind. I wished I were still up there with her, playing our stupid girl games. But I would not let Tamara think I was a chicken, and so I said, "Sure." And then, wanting to show her that I was not short on ideas, I added, "How about we pretend we're runaways?" Tamara scoffed. "Baby games," she said, and I felt small and ridiculous. I stood there waiting for her judgment to pass. "Wait," she said, "actually, that's good." She threw her shovel down on the ground. I looked at her. "Really?" I said. "Yeah, I'm the runaway, and you're the guy who kidnaps me." "Oh," I said, "I guess. Okay." I stood there doing nothing. I had played the bad guy before, the robber or the Indian, when I was 6 or 7. I was the littlest one in my class, always chosen for these roles. But the kind of game Tamara was proposing seemed more sinister, and I was not sure what was expected. "Dummy," she said, "you have to grab my hands and pretend to tie them." She turned around and put her hands behind her back, handcuff style. I reached out and held her wrists. They were thin and bony, paper dry under my clammy hands. "Tighter," she said, and I tried to comply. "And then push me." She looked around at the trees. "Over there." She nodded her head to indicate an old mesquite tree. Its branches nodded and twisted, forming a dark barrier against the sky, so that the ground underneath was bare. I did as I was told and walked forward, pushing Tamara ahead of me. "Now what?" I said when we reached the tree. "Now." She cocked her head and thought for a minute. "Now you pull my pants down." I stared at her. She still had her back to me, and I loosely held her hands. I hesitated, afraid to do what she told me, but more afraid not to, afraid that if I did not, then everything that people believed about me, that I believed about myself, would be true, that I would indeed be a baby, that I would never again have the opportunity to be shown behind the curtain of Tamara's world. In that moment of hesitation, Tamara grew impatient and turned around to face me. "Come on," she said, "this is getting boring." She unbuttoned her own jeans and grabbed my hand. "Put your hand there," she said. I felt a nervous thrill inside my stomach. Closing my eyes, I reached down carefully. I could feel her short, silky hair, damp with sweat, but soft. Until recently, I had not even known you were supposed to get hair down there. I had woken up one morning to find sharp stubble where the previous day there had been nothing. I'd sat on my bed staring at it for 10 minutes, wondering whether and how I should cut it off. Feeling Tamara's now gave me a pleasant shivering sensation. I felt an ache between my own legs that I didn't understand. I stroked the hair back and forth between my fingers. I opened my eyes and saw that Tamara was still watching me with the same level gaze. "Now tell me, say I'm going to do it to you," she said. I gave a nervous laugh and bit my lip. "Say it," she commanded. The words came out of my mouth, a hoarse and ragged whisper. Tamara giggled, and I felt a bubble of excitement, knowing I had made her happy. "Again," she said. "Say it again, and now put your finger inside." But I did not know what she meant. At that age, I had not yet begun to explore my own body, and had only a rudimentary understanding of anatomy. I stroked her hair again, hoping it would be enough, and gave her a small, worried smile. "Oh, for Christ's sake," she said, "do I have to show you everything?" She put her hand on top of mine and guided it down to where I could feel the bare, wet folds of skin. My middle finger slipped up inside her, and she gasped and laughed again. I felt my face grow hot as a deep shame spread through me. Tamara held my wrist tight and leaned back against the mesquite. She twisted her hips and closed her eyes. I felt tears welling up behind my eyes, and I swallowed hard to stop them from coming. Desperate, I looked away from her face and around through the desert scrub. The sun was on the decline, the time of day when everything stood out more clearly, more brightly, before fading into the black silhouettes of dusk. Through the crisscross of the ocotillo tentacles and the fingers of Choya, I thought I saw a flash as of the sun reflecting off glass. Was someone standing back there, hidden in the undergrowth? Panic overtook me, and I jerked my hand back and out, wiping my fingers on my shorts and kneeling on the dusty ground. Tamara opened her eyes and looked down at me. Her upper lip curled and her nostrils flared. Her cheeks had red patches across them. "What is your problem?" she said. I looked away from her. "I just thought," I said. She gave me a chance to finish the sentence, but I couldn't. No ending seemed good enough. I knew I had failed her. She buttoned her jeans quickly and started to walk away. I stood up to follow her. "Wait," I called. "Come back. I can do it. I want to." And I did. I wanted to try again and see if I could get it right for her, for myself. I wanted to feel that strange feeling between my legs again. Tamara stopped and turned, locking her eyes on mine. "Get away from me," she said, "you pervert." And she disappeared into the brambles above me. Now I was alone in the clearing.